We should be recording from there.
So from there, yeah.
Great, thanks, Martin.
Okay, well, thanks a lot for the invitation. Great pleasure to talk about the possible bottom-up global observation system for the future. So I think the point I would like to make today is really what is it that we need in the future? We need to become predictive. That's the most important one. Oh, I get my echo, but I think that's okay. I'll just continue talking.
Maybe you should mute yourself.
I'll mute here, Martin. Let's see.
Okay, good. Then observe the entire planet, which means mining, remote sensing, and other animal-based systems. Then making use of natural experiments, which I think is ubiquitous now during the Anthropocene. And I think it would be really important to have non-commercial global animal IoT observation systems, such as ICARUS. Now, why do we have to become predictive? I think this is something that ecology is really lacking largely, at least in the past, that we make use of the emergent properties of interlinked intelligent sensors, and that's the Internet of Animals. So how can we do this, and what can we learn from that? I think what we have seen in the past is that if we tag a lot of animals at the same time and look at their interactions, we can, for example, predict individual life histories. So from a group of thermaling storks that Andrea Flack and colleagues observed, we can actually nicely predict their life histories within 10 minutes of joint circling. So we can predict who is flying where, how far do they fly, and based on the mortality records that we have, also predict how long-lived those animals will be. And that's, I think, very exciting, because that has always been a major problem on ecological forecasting and prediction in the past. And that also means we can predict why these animals are dying, because in different areas and for different reasons they are dying on mostly about different causes in the different areas. But at the same time, we can also predict what the environment is about. We can, through the joint circling, measure wind speed or thermal strength in these areas all around the world by animals. But we can also go beyond that and make predictions for areas where animals are usually not observed. So global predictions on vector migrations. We can take the data that are available. We can predict the wind highways from the wind support systems, predict optimal routes, and then really go into the future and say, where are the predicted routes of animals in the areas where we can't yet observe them all the time, continuously in the Congo, in the middle of the Sahara, and even to do that for individual species. So I think that's super exciting, but not only that, we can use this information to predict why this matters for us in the Anthropocene, for animal-human interactions, for example, for power lines, for wind turbines, whatever it is, and more organizations are really seeking those data. But you can also take animals and make direct observations. This has been done by NOAA with elephant seals massively, but now this can also be done and verified, calibrated on flying animals like these geese that are then measured with a sonic anemometer. Gil Bora's work, working with us on that. Then to use these animal information systems all around the world to inform weather services, for example. This is now starting in Germany with the German Weather Service and the homing pigeons. Or you can really predict global pandemics. So all these diseases that are now, I think, known around the world to result from interactions of animals and humans, You have vector-borne diseases making up for about 70% of the zoonotics. Avian influenza being one of them that's very prominent this year, again in Europe. Affected lots of the seabird scanids. But we can use animals to predict that through their body temperature, for example. This is even for low pathogenic avian influenza. And then make predictions based on the remote sensing data in real time, where will the most likely transport of these diseases occur, over which routes and in which directions. I think that's important to make ecology and the animal sciences around the world relevant. Or African swine fever, you can do that in near real time with electronic ear tags. This is work by Kevin Morell and his team in our group, where within about 3 hours, we can detect differences in the dynamic body acceleration of these ears, and that is linked actually to infections with African swine fever. So in 3 hours in a wild boar, you can detect whether it has African swine fever or not. Or you take the birds that are accumulating around desert locust swarms in Africa, in Madagascar, or any place around the world where still about 1/10 of the world population is affected by desert locusts every year. We will predict where these things are happening and in what magnitude they're happening. So I think this is something what we really need to do, but we can also go beyond that and use the sixth sense of animals to try to predict natural disasters. We're doing that at Mount Etna. We have animals out there now and are actually starting to include our predictions in the Institute of Seismology and Volcanology of Sicily to really have goats and other animals, dogs and donkeys, and cows and sheep, as another sensor type that is being included in what's already out there. And I think all of us know that the more sensor types you have, the more, the better your prediction will be in the end. So very nicely seen here, for example, we have regular nights where there's always some activity, but before there are major outbreaks, there is a massive increase in activity. But there are different systems, different behavioral systems that we need to include to really make these predictions. What's important now is that, as we all know, we can observe for the first time the entire planet, link remote sensing with biodiversity, human mobility, and animal mobility data. We have massive Earth observation satellite systems going back with Landsat to the 1982s, where we can observe a really greening of the planet in most spectral fields. But for animals, it's far and few between. There's now, I think, as the reason why we are all together discussing these points, possibilities to do these comparisons globally. One of the databases, mostly terrestrial, is WoofBank. I think you probably all know the system that we send data via different data channels to a common data service that is interacting with other databases. And this is becoming easier and easier. I think the main problem is still to manage the ownership of those data. That's a very sensitive topic, and also the safety of the animals that are involved in this. But you see that there's a super exponential growth in the number of locations that we get in the taxa that we have as a global community. These data are not owned by some institution, but they are owned by the people that are studying these animals and then shared among the community. But if you just look, for example, in the Alps, the eagles, and look at the data points that are there, it's amazing how dense the locations are right now. With about 10 or 15,000 animals feeding to the WoofBank, growing by 3 to 5 million points a day. So it's amazing how good the information is becoming on that. And this can now be also displayed in near real time to understand the true influence of these animal movements on the planet and vice versa. The nice thing is also that the public will be included. So there are, I think by now, 380,000 users of the Animal Tracker app, and increasing by the day. So all around the world, there are animals that are being followed by people, and this is becoming really an interesting topic for many people out in the public, but also as an impetus to go out and observe the animals out there. The nice aspect is that we can closer and closer link physical measurements of the globe to animal movements. Cameron Zapri's group has just linked 20 years of data in the race field with animal movement, and there are very exciting connections. So what we are seeing, what we have seen as just as a some indication that something is happening, is that animals are moving, like these demozoic cranes, in areas specifically where groundwater has increased and avoiding areas where it has decreased. Now, Cameron Zapfi, Martina Scacco, and Elham Lourani have analyzed this on a global scale with the variance of change in water and the average change in water. And you see that there are massive differences around the globe. So this is Earth observations from the German Air and Space and NASA, JPL, with the GRACE missions over the last 20 years. And you see that animals are hanging out in areas that are changing in different ways. And this is now done on a pixel by pixel around the world. And we see very exciting patterns that are currently being written up for publication. So a very nice way to link these patterns together on really observations of animals with the rest of the observations that we can get remotely. Now, in the Anthropocene, I think it's also really exciting that we have these natural experiments. We have climate change, we have biodiversity loss, water changes, diseases, and so on. And in a way, it's sad to see all this, but on the other hand, for ecologists, it's really exciting because they are natural experiments. So the community, I think, is capitalizing more and more on that. This is work by Molly Tucker and Thomas Muller, and the whole group of authors. So it's really going the physics route of having 50s, hundreds of authors together. Human alterations of landscape, shortened animal movements, or the Anthropause study pioneered by Christian Rutz and others, to really see what has changed during that time. And many of you are involved in the follow-ups of that to really see, for example, wider things to do in Kashmir and in other places. But you see a pattern of differences, and that is exciting because that gives us a very high variance in our measurements and a high predictability for these interactions. Now, what's also really important is that communities are changing. As we know, biodiversity is decreasing in many areas. This is for insects, where I think we can use that as natural experiments. We can use that in birds and songbirds. 400 million songbirds missing in Europe, about 2 or 3 billion missing in the Americas. Crazy times, but I think very exciting for ecologists if we can observe it in the right way. And this mostly also goes back to the need for standardization and data integration. This is something that Sarah Davidson and Gilbora and others have pioneered, to really bring together these data with ownership being guaranteed to the people that have gathered these data, but still the possibility to integrate, work together and make joint analyses. And it's actually really exciting that there are totally unexpected outcomes. For example, asynchronous responses to climate change across tropic levels that are just not predicted from a few studies that are isolated, But if you bring them all together, you can see that. So very exciting times, I think, in ecology to bring together data, make the Internet of Animals, and make predictions out of that. Now, why do we need a non-commercial global animal IoT system? I think it is really necessary that we have a system that allows cheap and easy access to these data. We are in the time of the Internet of Things, where data should be sent for basically free. We're in a similar situation, I think, like 60 years ago, when all the universities and all the outfits made their own telescopes. And then somebody, George Robinson, came and said, well, let's make a very large array, let's put it all together, let's standardize, let's work together to get a better grasp of our view of the universe. And I think that's the same way we do it now, vice versa, on the planet. We can observe all these animals together if we standardize our procedures, standardize the transmission protocols, if we have the right one actually. That also allows us a two-way communication. We know that tags can be produced very cheaply for next generation, maybe $100 or so, currently 200. That include all these sensors and all the measurements. And I think the key is that this would enable us to do truly global observations and experiments. This has been done at least for a year on an experimental system on the ISS. Very exciting data. If you even just look at the cuckoos, the longest land bird migrations at all. Very exciting data that are currently being written up. And I think we just need more of that and need that as a biological way to observe the planet. The good thing is that AI can be on the chip, on the tag, so we can really, in the future, make these observations on the animals and only send the bits that are relevant, because these bits are super cheap to send. You don't have to send all the information. You can send most of the information, all of the information, when you are in good contact, in Wi-Fi contact. So you can combine the various ways to get your bits across the data channels to really get most important one ground to ground, ground to space, and the less important one, the less urgent ones, then later on as a summary. Now, I think we're getting close to a system that is fulfilling these requirements. We have worked on that as a bottom-up system for the last 20 years to get the right waveform, to use the least energy per bit, and that is now, I think, being implemented hopefully soon. It went through a successful phase A as a Grace I instrument, so the combination of gravity and ICARUS. The decision whether this will be financed on the ICARUS side will come in the next 2 weeks or so by the German government. We think there are very good chances to do that. We know that technically it's a perfect combo of systems, perfect satellite system, but we also know that this will give us ways to get much smaller on tag sizes, so that we can do studies that we can now only do by brute force and small radio tags, in the future on satellite tags. So the kind of studies, for example, on insect navigation, insect observations from space, small warblers, bats from space, can be done as soon as these systems are available on a global scale. Now, the good thing is that software-defined receivers are now so powerful that you can build them into small satellites. This was a recent Bits and Pretzels founders meeting in Munich, where we met the guys that are now producing the first satellites for ICARUS that will be launched next year, and then another one in 24. So this is the meeting where also Arnold Schwarzenegger came in his lederhosen and presented the reasons why you should be inventive and have the access to space and also to your own data in space. So this is something where I think the future lies, you can make small satellites and get at least the basic information for the additional information for the better systems, for the, say, 10 times better system. You still need the big satellites, the Grace Eye satellites, the huge satellites to provide a much better observation system even for the very small animals. We funded Talos Space for that recently as a company that will take over the development, make it an OEM system so that others can join. Because we think that it is important to have the right kind of information systems. We now know and have documented that other systems like LoRa, Sigfox, or IoT, or other LP-WAN systems are not really the ones you have to use or can use if you go into space. There's a very serious Doppler shift issue, but you can use, and it's optimized for that, 2 different waveforms, UCSS. That's one of the ones we're using, but ICARUS is the better one. So this would be one that I think satellite systems can use in the future. You can build small sets for the basics and large sets for the advanced systems. And this will give us the power as a community, I think, to observe animals from space. For example, these rhinos that have little ear tags that can send the information either terrestrially through a Sigfox network, which we regularly do now over 120 kilometers, but also through space in an ecosystem. Yeah, I think those are, from my perspective, the future developments, very exciting times. I think it's probably the best time ever to be an animal ecologist. You can work globally, you can have data transmission systems that really work across scales, and you can link through the other systems on a global level. So very exciting times, very exciting developments, and I think a brilliant future for all of the young guys that are going into this field. Thanks a lot.